So it's interesting because I know what it's like on the end of being in business, especially in the US, but then to see it on the other side that maybe well-being is a little bit more important than the bottom line. Maybe not feeling overwhelmed every time you walk into your shift is a little bit better than focusing on the bottom line. And having a leadership team that supports that, it's like a unicorn.
Welcome to the Joyous Path to Millions podcast with me, your host, Emily June Wilcox, serial entrepreneur, seven-figure business owner, mindset junkie, creator of the Money Wound Medicine program, devoted mama of two, and lover of coffee and crystals. My mission is to put more money in the hands of soulpreneurs through healing money wounds, building abundant businesses, and balancing masculine and feminine energy. When we do this, we collectively uplevel the frequency of the planet and help usher in new paradigm wealth. Each week, a new episode will air featuring expert advice, live coaching, and guest interviews where we'll dive into honest money conversations and the behind-the-scenes truth of building our aligned fempires. We all deserve a healthy, empowered relationship with money so we can experience more freedom, pleasure, and joy on our joyous path to millions. So get ready and let's dive in. Hello, I've got a gorgeous episode for you today. My kiddos are actually both home sick today, and I brag that I'm still able to do work, and it feels so good to be in this phase of life where the kiddos can just veg out and watch kid-appropriate Halloween movies and just have a chill day. And it doesn't have to be so disruptive to our schedule. But they're in all the things, as you guys know. We got soccer, we got softball, we've got School of Rock, and now JJ is doing private drum lessons in addition to the band practice lesson, and Faye's doing violin. And Faye's doing this writing program with Jeff. There's all the things. So we had a really busy weekend, and it's nice to just give them a chill day. And I wouldn't have done it unless they had fevers last night, which they did. But it's just their body saying, we need a little downtime. And so they're getting it. And it's nice to be modeling for them what it looks like to listen to our bodies and give our bodies rest when they need rest. So I just had the most invigorating conversation with Kat Burns. It was the fourth and final part of our LinkedIn series, our best business practices that would get us kicked out of the boardroom. And we're talking about what to value more than the bottom line. It is an incredible conversation. So without further ado, let's dive in.
We're talking about how we feel as like the emotional currency is what we value more. Is it proper to bring in like that when you are feeling good, that's like what alignment feels like. And that's the place that you can create from, right? That brings in bridging the gap with feels like, or
yeah.
Is that like,
because I think basically, our whole point is that emotional currency is the leading indicator for currency and profits. And so then it's, why is that? It's not just because we all want to be singing Kumbaya in the workplace. It's actually energetically what brings in the good ideas, the aligned workflow, and like all of the things that create efficiency, profitability, new launches that go amazing.
Perfect. That's what I figured. I just wanted to double check. That's where we were going with the conversation.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Sweet. I feel like after a long 6 months of not knowing where I was going, I finally feel like I'm gaining some clarity with some new things. Yeah. I finished a really huge project for a pitch for a film that I'm working on. Nice. And then ever since that's opened up like just like a whole bunch of new possibilities on where things are going to move to. So I'm like, okay, you feel like a person again. I needed a break. Like I realized I did LinkedIn for a year straight, like killing it. And then I just got myself I pigeonholed myself into being like a business coach when that's not really what I want to do.
Right.
And it started to feel so misaligned. So I'm like, almost feel like this for me, doing this series was great practice, but also I feel like I want to do it again when I'm like really lit and I'm going to be like, Emily, let's do it again.
Right.
I'm excited about LinkedIn because I just needed that time. Really like, it was I don't know. Sometimes you just have to do that, I think, when you're figuring out what's next.
Yeah. I think it's like, you can't force it. Anytime anyone's in the void, I'm like, I know it's fucking annoying and you have to surrender. The only way out is through. And as long as you're fighting it, instead of surrendering to it, you're just prolonging how long you have to be in it.
100%. Yeah. I'm glad I just said to myself, okay, step back and work on something else, because it really opened up a lot for me of what I needed to see. And the new offers about creativity. I always want to talk to people about creativity, but creativity as a spiritual practice is really, especially because I've really like the spirituality element is like really, it's become so loud now that I'm like practicing Reiki. I'm doing like sound healing, like I'm doing things here that are like feeling really like somatic based, like in-person healing type of thing. And I'm like, you can't not, I need to come out of the closet about that. That's part of the deal for me, because I've always just been talking about the things. And now it's a very different energy of stepping into that from a healer standpoint and going, you can't keep denying that this is part of you. It's out there now. Yeah. So
are you still designing a tarot deck?
I spent a lot of time learning the tarot. And so I started doing some cards just to create products. But then this pitch deck took me off like on a totally different direction. And so now I'm actually in the process of creating that offer where I create custom oracle cards. So and I want to get a couple people to like do it where I actually do like a reading. I do like a 3-card tarot reading plus an energy, like a Reiki kind of session. And then somebody sends a photo of themselves. And then I'm going to use that with AI and build like a custom oracle card off of that. Like as a gift, one of the things. But even that going, okay, what am I doing? And I really do want to create a tarot deck, but I'm still playing in Mid-Journey and figuring out the tool, because that's a lot. And it feels like it's coming, but it comes when I feel like once this offer's ironed out and I'm starting to create from that space, and I'm going to start putting tarot in my coaching, and I'm in Reiki healing in my coaching, and it's still, if you had told me that this is where I was going down the line, even just 5 years ago, I would have been like, you're crazy. My mom, what are you doing? It's definitely one of those coming out of the closet. It really feels like I'm having to reintroduce myself in this capacity, which is, wow, okay. Yeah. But I feel like I'm following the call, right? Like when you just go, okay, I'm just going to follow this. That's where this opens up, and it takes that time. I was really fighting it for a little while. I'm like, there's got to be something else.
That's just a little hobby.
There isn't something else. This is actually it. Stop. Yeah. That's what it felt like. Right. Oh, this isn't just for fun anymore. You're not, no, this is, it feels like that's the thing that brings the joy, right? If we're talking really about what we're talking about today, like that is the thing that brings the most joy. Yeah. I find the emotion is so overwhelming when I'm doing Reiki now. I'm just like, wow, what I can see, what I can't see. I'm just like, okay, wow. I've always been really incredulous about things in my life. I can't believe this is happening. I've been I remember a friend of mine when I was in LA, like 2015, was like, why are you so incredulous? Like, why are you always can't believe how good things are? And then it's my default comes from there not being good, right? So like always having this experience, or the default of not knowing and not being like, oh, I still need to learn more. Even it's in my design. I'm a 1-3 generator. So I'm always having to learn things to figure out what works. Yeah. And I think I just never really embraced that that's how I learn, instead of that's how I make mistakes. So I had to differentiate, like, you're learning here. You're not fucking up. There's that. So it's been a really big shift as well, that, wow, everything you've learned has brought you here, instead of it being like, and that's what I teach anyway. Like everything you've learned is here. So how come you're not stepping into that yourself? Yeah. I am now, I guess. Like, it's about time. Yeah. And are you good? I just took up all of our 10 minutes of beforehand call.
Oh, that's perfect. I see the little numbers going up as you're joining. Can you just pop on and say hi and say where you're joining from? We'll get started in just a second. Kat and I were just talking about like how scary but also liberating it is when you really step into your creative genius and allow yourself to monetize it. So it's been a fun little conversation.
Yes. We can definitely do a recap if we need to.
Yeah.
Even today's topic. About
I took my kids to see the Taylor Swift concert in the movie theater on Sunday.
Oh, okay.
And I like bawled my eyes out, ugly cried at least 3 different times. Not even joking, like all the napkins that we had for like greasy popcorn fingers, I was just using to mop up tears. But I was just so overcome by like the power of feminine and creativity and breaking rules and setting trends, but also just this idea that like she's standing on this stage doing like the very thing that she loves the most in the world. And there's, I don't know, 50,000 people that are also doing the thing that they love the most. And that there's a financial exchange and there's an energetic exchange and everyone wins. And how incredible it is to build $1 billion business doing the thing that you love the very most and probably would do for free.
100%. I haven't seen this and I didn't know it was in the theater because I'm a little out of the loop with what's going on in American cinema, but I can get the world of it as seeing the Beyonce documentary, for example, was a perfect, I remember watching that and had a very similar experience because I have a friend in the UK that worked on some of the tour and got to see the live show. And I could just feel the energy of, wow, there's so much put into this and there's so much love, but it is like the thing that it bridges the gap, right? It bridges the gap between entertainment and joy and freedom and like bringing it all together into this beautiful harmony at once. And like music is something that ties so many people together, right? We all have our little special gifts. And that's just one perfect example of being able to set yourself free by just being unapologetic and using those creative gifts that you have to step into the world as who you are and have people celebrate you for that and to feel unapologetic and celebrate yourself for that. And it sounds, yeah,
totally. And just because I can't help myself, I'm going to share 2 more things that are actually great business lessons. And then we'll jump into the topic of our event today. But number 1, Taylor went to all the movie studios to try to pitch this. She's like, I want to bring my concert to theaters. And as a former industry person, none of these studios have anything in their pipeline right now because there have been strikes for all these months. Yeah. And they all lowballed her. And she walked away from the negotiation and went directly to the theaters and struck a deal with them and then has since broken every box office record.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Like for pre-ticket sales, it's the previous record was like some Spider-Man movie and it was like 13 million. I think she did 30 million in sales. We're not just talking about broke the record a little bit, shattered. And then the other thing I think is so cool is then the media is trying to talk about like her versus Beyonce and Beyonce's movie versus this. And she shows up at her red carpet premiere with Beyonce. And I feel like this is the old way where it's like, oh, we're going to pit women against each other. We need women to be in competition. Yeah. And she's, no, we're not doing it that way. This is about women collaborating and lifting each other up and supporting each other. And it's Beyonce gets to be freaking amazing and Taylor gets to be amazing. And they both get to love each other and support each other. It is not a competition.
I have so many goosebumps. Also just hilarious that I even mentioned the Beyonce documentary as like the pivotal thing in my mind that I go to. Right. Because the Taylor one this is new, right? I didn't know that was a thing. I know she has a documentary out, which I've also seen, but this is a different thing. But it's really way to go, right? Way to break through the actual mold of what it's breaking through the grain of what everyone else tells you to do. I find that where I am right now in my business is I'm finally stepping away from what everyone else tells you to do and stepping into what is meant for me. This is what we were talking about right before we went live, in the sense of sometimes you get off track. Sometimes you go into a little different of a pivot and you think you're going in one direction. And that's what all the experts say. And that's what that's the cap, right? That's the cap of all the movie studios telling you that this is the way that it's always done. This is what you have to do. This is where you put your little square peg into a round hole and hope for the best. And so it's another one of those things where it's like, there's another way than the way that it is, that it's been, that it's always done. And when you can actually just see that for what it is and step into how that feels, especially when it's like women supporting women, honoring women, love it, like really seeing that there's a sisterhood beyond this superficial pitting us against each other, right? And so just getting out of that mold in itself is the epitome of freedom, right? Not feeling like you're in competition because someone makes more money than you or someone's doing better, has more attention. The sky's the limit really when it comes to that. So I love that that's what you, I love that provoked so much emotion in you as you shared.
I know. And now my 8-year-old daughter is obsessed with Taylor Swift. So it ends up being good business, but I don't know that I'm sure there were business decisions and thoughts leading up to it, but I do think it really started with creativity and a dream. And then it turns into this thing. And now she's developing this whole new generation of Swifties. And it's really incredible. I think her concert or her tour did 3 billion. And now the box office, like it's just unbelievable. So I think it really ties into our topic today. So this is the last in our 4-part series about our favorite business ideas that would get us kicked out of the boardroom. And our topic for today is talking about what to value more than the bottom line. So why don't we just do quick intros in case it's someone's first time meeting one of us. Kat, do you want to share who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Kat Burns, and I am a creative entrepreneur and a mindset coach. I also am working a bit in the spiritual realm these days. So I'll be having some new offerings regarding, we're having some issues loading the event. Is that just on my side or is that on all of us?
I don't know. It says we're live.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep going, but my computer screen went funky.
Oh, okay. I'm showing multiple people live. So
okay, great.
Could one of those folks just pop in a comment so that we know that you can see us and hear us? Okay. We would so appreciate that.
It could very well be my screen, not to interrupt my lovely introduction of myself. But anyway, I love to talk to women about what sets them free, what lights them up, what gets them excited. And I think that's why this conversation and this series has been so great, because I am a person that comes from one very specific world where I was very burnt out, exhausted, on the grind, working for everyone else but myself, stepping into this new realm where I want to be a stand for women. I want to show up for women and create beautiful things. And I am stepping into talking about manifestation and alignment and all those beautiful new age values when it comes to business, atypical ways that people talk about growing in business. So that's why this conversation has been so great. And I'm really appreciative that we've had the opportunity to do it together.
Amazing. And likewise. Hello, everyone. I am June Wilcox. I am a money healer, a business mentor, multi-7-figure CEO. I founded an e-commerce brand, followed by a marketing agency, took both of those to 7 figures, and then got the spiritual message that I really was meant to take a step away from those businesses and focus my time and energy on helping other women entrepreneurs walk the joyous path to millions. So my passion is helping women to heal their money wounds so that they can step into bigger wealth and then do the spiritual and strategic things to build their fempire and do it in a very joyous way. So I'm really happy to be here, and I've loved this series. So I just want to encourage anyone listening, if you didn't catch parts 1, 2, and 3, they are fantastic. They're absolutely worth going back to. And if you go on either of our LinkedIn profiles and click on events, you'll see a list of the events that we've done, and you can watch the replay of those past events. And I've also been putting these talks onto my podcast, which is the Joyous Path to Millions show. It's a top 3% global podcast. So if that's easier, you are welcome to listen there as well. All right.
That's great. I'm so glad that you were cross-posting, because I feel like some people that aren't on LinkedIn have also really enjoyed this conversation. And I've gotten lots of great feedback about these little atraditional topics that we've been talking about. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think the reason we wanted to close this out with what to value more than the bottom line is because when we think about traditional business, it's probably one of the biggest criticisms is that my organization only cares about money. They only care about what they have to report to Wall Street. They only care about earnings, and they don't care about people. They don't care about innovation. They don't care about creativity. They don't care about whatever. It all comes down to a balance sheet, a profit and loss statement, and that's all that matters to them. And certainly there are plenty of great organizations out there that care about more than just that. But it is a trap. Like, it is a hard thing in business when you legitimately need to pay attention. Like, I'm the money person here. I'm so happy for businesses to be profitable. I certainly want you looking at your numbers and knowing your bottom line. But when we make decisions only based on how it's going to impact the bottom line, that can become really problematic for so many reasons. And when we look at a lot of industry disruptors, I think they had the advantage of not being a publicly traded company, not having a board of advisors, not having shareholders to report to. And so they were actually able to focus on things other than the bottom line, which allowed them to come in and disrupt their industry and have that competitive advantage. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on just why it's problematic to only look at the bottom line.
It's problematic for a lot of reasons. First of all, I don't know which one to start with, whether it's that it's a very masculine principle to only come from the bottom line because it's in the state of doing. That's the first thing that comes to my mind, right? If we're only looking at our money at the end of the day, it's a very much do, there's no space to be, which I think as we've discussed in previous iterations of this series, that there has to be a balance inside of any of that. And we're so into a masculine model in traditional business nowadays. Like, businesses are bred to be a certain way. There's not a lot of space to go outside of what that is. And if we're always inside of this experience where only focused on money, we're only focused on the bottom line, there really is no space to grow and flourish. And it ends up having a lot of the employees feel drained, deteriorating, like not focusing on themselves, too accountable to, so focused on their accountability to their sales goals or their this, that they lose track of who they are. I personally relate to that myself, having not only the pressure of the company itself being put on me, but also the internal pressure I put on myself based on my own beliefs to have me do a good job, to make sure I'm fulfilling my goals, to make sure I'm staying on top of things. So it was like you're pushed down once and then you're pushed down again. And that is not only is it is a masculine principle because we're inside of the doing, but it doesn't leave very much space for rest, for recovery, for the ability to enjoy when you're always focused in that very specific space. I don't want to blame the masculine by saying that's not at all what I'm saying, but there's just the way that we've always done things. We're going to keep getting certain results in that way, but that may not be the best way. That's probably the biggest part. That's the biggest thing that comes to my head off the, what about you?
Yeah, no, it's such a good point, because when there's this feeling of it's never enough, it's I gave everything and we had a record quarter, and then it's just immediately, okay, great. How can we do it again? Or how can we beat last quarter, next quarter?
Yeah.
It starts to feel exhausting. And frankly, this is something that we often take into entrepreneurship as well. So
as I'm like, yes.
Yeah, if you think we're only calling out big businesses, we're not. When we take it into entrepreneurship and we never stop to celebrate, we never stop to see how far we've come and just to appreciate it. And we just treat ourselves like workhorses, like, okay, now run even faster next time. Oh, perfect. You got a new PR. Let's see if we can beat it.
No.
It feels really exhausting. It doesn't honor cyclicality, which is what we see modeled in nature and what we see modeled in the female body, which is, it's not just grow and never stop growing. Where do we see that in nature? Cancer cells. That's really it. That's like the only thing in nature that just is unlimited growth all the time, and it ain't good.
Yeah, that's a good point. We think about cyclical nature in general. Like, I always go back to I have a little group chat with my friend that I went to college with. And we're always just, oh God, if Monday were a person, it would have no friends, right? Oh, how did it become Friday already? Oh, the weekend was too short. And she is inside of that traditional model of working. And I have a bit more of a flexibility with my schedule because I work for myself. But there is this, like, even the 5-day work week, in a cyclical sense, it's not actually a cycle that is workable, right? Because we don't give ourselves the downtime to rest. And when you were just talking about this experience of always having to beat the next thing, it's like, we're not taught that it's okay to have downtime and rest, that it's okay that we don't always meet that goal, right? Because there is always this experience of the business may go under. It's no, if you're Apple, the chances are, if you don't meet the insane quota that you're, no, not to call out Apple, but just any business in general that knows what success looks like. And if you're always inside of we need to expand, we need to expand, we need to expand, then sometimes you can't just be with what is. And we're ingrained to learn that process from a very young age, especially in our culture. I would say as Americans, I feel like it's probably because I live in Portugal. So you have to remember, like, here we have restaurants that book a dinner table at 8 p.m. for a table of 2 at 8 p.m. and they leave the table for you all night. They don't do another sitting at 10 or a 7 and a 9 because they're not focused on the bottom line. They would rather let their wait staff say, okay, we're not going to overload you right now. We're going to give you the amount of time that you need. And if your table opens up at 9:30 and we can seat someone that's walking in, sure. But we're not going to put our employees so far nose to the grindstone that they're working until 4 o'clock in the morning trying to clean and they're exhausted and they're working so hard with their tip. There's not an experience of that here. Yeah. So it's interesting because I know what it's like on the end of being in business, especially in the US. But then to see it on the other side, that maybe well-being is a little bit more important than the bottom line. Maybe not feeling overwhelmed every time you walk into your shift is a little bit better than focusing on the bottom line. And having a leadership team that supports that, it's like a unicorn. And culture's changing. There's the two sides of that. I don't know if I'm sure you have things to add about that, but that's what first comes to mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think a topic that I would like to bring forward for this conversation, kind of key point number 1, is that the bottom line, or financial currency, we can call it, is always a lag indicator. Always. And we can't focus on lag indicators. I think we all understand that in business, that even if you're like, okay, this is our bottom line revenue goal for next quarter, what's the very next question? Like, so what are we going to do? You've got to start going upstream. You've got to go to the lead indicators, because currency, financial outcomes are lag indicators, always. We don't really want to just value a lag indicator. And then the natural question becomes, what are the lead indicators? And what should we be looking at as that first initial sign that the company is headed in a good direction and that the lag indicators are going to be good? And this is where you and I maybe diverge from traditional business advice, but we both agree that the number one thing that you should be looking at is actually emotional currency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to be clear, not just because we think everyone should be at work holding hands, singing Kumbaya, feeling really good about life, but because there are actual plenty of studies. And when you understand energetics, we know that there's also metaphysics principles that really support this, that emotional currency is indeed a lead indicator of financial success, of business success. So would you elaborate on that, Kat?
I think that the perfect way to look at it, when I pull it apart, right? It all comes back to the emotion that you're feeling breeds more of the emotion on an energetic level, right? This is really where it comes down to. So if you're in a good mood, you happen to notice that more good things may happen. And if something not so good happens, then perhaps it may not feel good for a second, but it won't affect you as much if you were in a down mood, right? If we're really getting into just like the basic principle of how we are, right? Like good breeds good and bad breeds bad. If you're going into a downward spiral, you're already down, you're already there. It could just feel worse. It's just compounding. It compounds in both directions. It's a very easy test for anything that we're creating in life. And that's a lot of the times where when we as people in this space will much rather talk about how are you feeling in this moment and how can you shift the context of how you feel into something that brings you more joy, that brings you more happiness. Because once you're in that state, it's like the colors in the sky get a little bit brighter. The touches of the light gets a little bit softer. It's like things get a little bit more bearable. And so if we're constantly focused on this hard-earned lag indicator that you will never get enough, you will never have enough, like just the words, you will never have like where does that sit on an emotional scale? Does that, like, if you're really thinking about the way you feel, you will never have enough of where do you feel that in your body? Does that bring you joy, or does that contract you and make you feel small and make you feel like you're in service of running on a hamster wheel? And so there are some examples. I would love to come up with 10 examples of the best companies that do this, but there is culture that is changing as far as like on a global scale, on seeing the value of making sure that well-being is a currency that people pay attention to, right? However, it's almost like we had to go so far on this side of the pendulum. It had to swing so far in this direction that people were literally burning out, quitting their jobs, not being able to get out of bed for 6 months because they were having chronic fatigue symptoms and things like that, that finally companies were like, wait a minute, like maybe we need to swing things back in the other direction. And so I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but I think it's a really good way to look at it. It's what are you feeling here? And where does that feel inside of you? Are you contracting, or are you expanding? Are you feeling at peace?
Right.
Are you feeling it? So I'd love for you to elaborate how you see it, because it's a big topic. Big.
I love thinking about it as contraction or expansion, because expansion is a term that we use a lot in business, right? I want to grow. I want to expand. I want to scale.
Yeah.
If you're feeling contracted, if your team is feeling contracted, like when you start Monday morning, if it feels, you already feel the weight of your to-do list, there's no space really for expansion. You're on a very linear path of getting things done. It's a very status quo feeling. And as you mentioned, law of attraction, we know this, it's a metaphysical principle. Expansion breeds more expansion. Contraction breeds more contraction. And so again, we see some companies doing this. There are progressive companies that have mandatory thinking time. And there are certain days that are on the calendar where there's no meetings, and they literally just want their engineers and their designers and their project managers to have this white space and this creativity to come up with the next good idea, to innovate, to expand, to think about doing something differently. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the approach of it just being like one day a month. Okay, be creative. It's time. It's your creativity day. Because we all know that it's not usually how it works. That's the day you're going to have writer's block. That's the day you're going to least likely to have the good ideas.
Especially if that's the only day that you're permitted to have an idea. Like we have to think about the pressure of what it means to have one day off, like like the weekends, right? We think about the weekends as a thing. It's I got to cram everything in. Like keep going, but it's a perfect setup for failure, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, going back to cyclicality, especially for women, it's like we have our own cycle inside of our body, and we're very impacted by the moon cycles as well. And so you'll often find when you start tracking your cycle and the moon cycle that there are certain times of the month where you are naturally more creative. And there are other times when you're naturally wanting to just check stuff off the to-do list and just finish the stuff you've already started. And so if I were to force myself to have a brainstorming day when I'm really in the energy of just finishing all the stuff I've already started, it's not going to work as well. And when we zoom out and look at this more holistically, yes, we have things to do, of course, but having a little bit more white space just in general in our days, a more realistic to-do list allows for a little bit of free flow, a little bit of things can shift. Oh, I'm getting this awesome idea and I really want to think about it and pursue it and just be in the dreaming of it. Okay, great. My schedule's not so stuffed with meetings that I could do that now, and I can shift a few of these things I thought I was going to do today to another day. But we have to give ourselves the gift of that. And we have to really value that emotional currency, that space for creativity in order to get the bottom line outcomes that we want. And I think there's a lot of lip service paid to it, but when it actually comes down to doing it, it's not there. And that's where employees get so frustrated, because there's nothing worse than having the leadership at your organization talk about how much they care about well-being and managing your to-do list and giving you white space and then loading you up with meetings. I'd rather you not even say you care about it than act like you're doing the right thing. You try working a week with my schedule and see how you feel.
I think it's interesting because we have to remember that a lot of the people that are at the top of these companies, for example, that are doing this lip service are probably so trained, well, obviously so trained inside of an experience of the masculine way of doing things that they don't even know what the benefits could be if they change the way they work. Could you imagine I was just reading an article on LinkedIn earlier today, I wish I had saved it, of about a man and a leader of an organization talking about cyclical, women's cycles in business and how you should honor women having their time. And it was like, it's about time that one person talked about how when we're on our periods, we don't I have in my calendar, no meetings this week, and I update it every single month. So I know, because I know when I'm on, I know when my energy drops, I know when I'm feeling crappy, and then I know when I need to hibernate. And I change it and make sure it's up to date, because our cycles change a little bit depending on, like you said, some factors. But imagine if every woman had the space to, and men have a cycle too, it's just not as prominent as women, right? Because they don't bleed. So there's not a very specific thing. But if everybody honored what that looked like inside of business, we think we're productive now. Can you imagine how productive we'd be if that was the norm? But going back to what I said at the very beginning, it's a very masculine concept to be focused on the bottom line. We were trained from that place. You have to think about the Industrial Revolution and what happened in the Great Depression and how the big businesses, the motor cars came into play. And it was more still inside of this engine that never stopped, because we as Americans were brought up into this, we're the best and we have to have it all and we can have it all. And America's the land of the free and we have all, and I'm not turning on America. I don't want anybody to think that's the case. I choose to live here for my own reasons, but growing up inside of that never endingness of the doing energy, it doesn't leave space for honoring things that maybe we learned a little wrong or off or different than we should have. And what's the consequence now? We're all suffering the consequence that now where we're swinging the pendulum so far to one side and the lip service doesn't matter, but people are starting to see, oh, maybe there's something to learn here. Maybe I need to catch on. And they're trying, but again, sometimes people don't know, men will never know what it's like to be women, just like women will never know what it's like to be men. But I would hedge a bet that women know a bit more about what it's like to be men, because women are also trained to be like men.
Right.
I was trained to be like a man. I didn't even step into my femininity as a woman until well into my 30s. So I think about that and it's, we're conditioned to be like men because men are strong and men provide and men do all this stuff. And we lost a little bit of that juice, like the gifts inside.
Yeah.
Does that resonate
Yeah.
with what I think? It's
Well, and ultimately,
opportunity.
it's rather than us trying to decide what it's like to be in anyone else's body, wouldn't it be revolutionary to just trust that each person knows themselves or equip them with the tools for that self-exploration so that they can learn when they're most productive, what type of schedule suits them best, and just hold them accountable to outcomes rather than a certain way of working. Because ultimately it's like, this is good business sense. This will make everyone more efficient, more lit up, coming up with innovative ideas. Like, this is not just soft and fluffy stuff. And when you brought up the industrial complex, right? When everyone was doing shift work and punching time cards and that kind of thing, it reminded me, I learned this recently and I wish I could credit where I learned it from. It was some podcast, but did you know that Henry Ford's actually responsible for weekends?
No.
And the reason is,
you mean that was a creative context where, sorry, go on.
I know. So this is an example where what's good for people is actually good for business. So at first it was only the elite that were buying cars.
Mm-hmm.
And after that tranche of sales happened, he was thinking like, how do I get the everyday person to start buying cars? And he noticed that the people who were working in the factories for him building the cars didn't own cars. He's like, how do we do this? And they were only getting one day off a week. And they were using that as a day of rest. And so they would stay close to home and they didn't need a car. And he hypothesized we actually need to give people 2 days off instead of just 1 day off, because then they'll have a day where they want to go out and explore and they'll need a car to do that. And so he started giving everybody 2 days off and he sold way more cars, and probably his employees were so much happier too.
Wow. Oh my, but can I just point out that even that, as revolutionary as it is, was so at the bottom line.
I know.
Are you kidding me?
I know.
Let's just butter this bread real quick and let's just figure out how we can get people to buy more cars here.
Right.
But that's the whole point of what we're talking about here. It's maybe we learned a little wrong. If this is what, it was great for business, and now we're stuck in this 5-day work week forever and nobody can get out of it, right?
But it is my point, is even though I'm saying like you shouldn't just value the bottom line, I guess what I'm also saying is, even if you actually only care about the bottom line, care about emotional currency, care about how your employees feel, only because that's the lead indicator to the lag indicator. So if you only care about the bottom line, fine. But things have changed since Henry Ford's time, and he made more money by having a weekend, 2 days off from work instead of 1 day off. And now we're in this time where we have insane amounts of access of information. Everything can be done more quickly. We have AI that can do a lot of things for us. Is it possible that we need this next wave of innovation about what work looks like? And like you said, this idea of a 5-day work week and 2-day weekends, maybe that's not even the thing anymore. And I look around at a lot of my entrepreneur friends that are crushing it, and they don't necessarily work a very traditional schedule.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that, because I work, and I will say this from a very being perspective, as a woman who was ingrained in the 5-day work week for at least, I would say 12 to 14 years of my life, I would feel guilty if I wasn't working. Okay, it's Tuesday for me at 5:38 p.m. Before this, I went to a yoga class. I had a conversation with my friend that's visiting. I cut my nails and got myself ready. I did things that people would go, you're not working at Tuesday at 2:00 in the afternoon. But that back maybe even upwards of a year or so ago would still grind on me. You're not working at Tuesday at 2:00. What are you doing? But for me, 1 p.m. on a Saturday or 2 p.m. on a Sunday is like prime creativity flow time for me. Why? Because no clients are talking to me in email. There's nothing coming in about, hey, what's the status update on this? There's not a lot of noise. My friends are having brunch or sleeping, or are we going to get together later? And no one's bugging me. I can dive in and I can write content. I can dive in and I can design. I can do things that are like all me on my time. And when I talk to my friends who work traditional 9 to 5-ish jobs, are like, you're working on a Sunday at 2? And I'm like, it is my favorite time to work. And then I have to actually go, and it's okay to not work at Tuesday at 2:00 because I need to have that space. I need to have that downtime where I'm focusing on myself. I need to be able to say, yeah, that yoga was super therapeutic for me. I'm very lit on this conversation. I'm going to go do a little work after this and call it a day. And that's okay. We don't have permission for that type of lifestyle because of the 5-day work week and the go culture and we need to have the bottom line. And when we don't allow that freedom for any of our employees or ourselves, we don't allow that permission, we're coming from lack. We're coming from, this should be another way than the way that it is, the way that works for me, the way that I flow and feel good. And that is, again, going back to the lag indicator, right? We're right back there where we started, where you're just being as counterproductive as you were when you were sitting there at 2:00 in the afternoon at your desk, not being productive and following your KPIs because you don't feel good about working right now because you're tired from lunch, or you work too hard at the blah, blah, blah. Now you're tired, or whatever else.
Yeah.
It's a very tricky, it's tricky.
Yeah. It's so true though. It's liberating when we start to recognize, oh, this is actually when I do my best work.
Mm-hmm.
And the downtime supports my work.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't think we have to live as work-centric of a life as we do. However, let's just say that everything we want to do is to maximize our work, just hypothetically. Then I would have to say, my meditation supports my work. Going to Pilates supports my work. Turns out going to the Taylor Swift concert on a Sunday afternoon at the movie theater with my kids supports my work. Like, I am so lit up and inspired in a way that I was not expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is true that the self-care, the downtime, the long showers, the going for a walk for an hour without your phone, it does support your work. Now, it also supports life. And I'm huge on the joyous path to millions. Like, it's not just about the destination. It's definitely about enjoying the journey. But again, even if we were just oriented toward the bottom line, even if we were just oriented toward work, then we must concede the fact that the times that we're not working actually do support us in being the best workers we can be.
I totally agree. What came to mind just now is this idea of the water cooler at work. And I used to work in this really cool office in Los Angeles that had a game room upstairs and a kitchen, and it was really cool. But it made me think, like, they had this culture where they promoted you to like take a break if you needed to. And I thought that was neat. It was the first time I'd ever experienced a job that like was really like, hey, we're going to step into this. If you need that space, you take it, kind of thing. And it was practiced and sometimes it wasn't, but they were at least on the right track. I felt supported. But if you think about, if you're in an office job and you're working 40 hours a week, how many of those hours do you actually work? How many times do you go outside and take a smoke break, or go to the water cooler and get a glass of water, or talk in the kitchen with your colleague, or just stare at the computer because you can't physically do another ounce of work because you're exhausted? We call that a 40-hour work week. But if you as part of the jobs that I do in the different areas that I do, I track my time for everything because I want to know how much time a week do I work? actually work. So right now I'm tracking that we're doing this because I'm like, okay, chat with Emily on LinkedIn, check. And that's part of one of this is work for me. This is something that we're doing for work. And I get to look at, okay, if I have a good 25-hour work week, I'm like, yeah, because I worked all those hours, like really heads down, phone off, in the zone, doing the thing, downtime, just like this, like in it. And a lot of people that work 40 hours a week, because they're not supported with the downtime, can't actually get in 40 hours of work. It doesn't really support our well-being and our health a lot of the times because we're not meant to be on that much. But because we've been trained, that's the norm, and that 40 hours is an 8-hour workday, 5 days a week. We don't really have any room to move from that. So anybody that's listening that's at their office right now on LinkedIn, it's, hey, guess what? This is actually probably part of your downtime that will give you, and I'm not saying that's wrong, because even if the problem is when we're encouraged to work that much, but we physically don't have the capacity. So we're on a LinkedIn Live at the office, trying to give ourselves 5 minutes of a break before we have to go into the next task, because that should support a healthy balance, as opposed to this, you've got to be on, right? You don't get paid for 40 hours a week of work to sit around and do nothing, like, or to sit around and look on LinkedIn, or to watch TV or whatever, to go to the water cooler, to have a smoke break or whatever it is. So I think that's it's an interesting kind of paradox.
Yeah.
When it comes to it.
Yeah. I find very similar to you. I work 20 to 25 hours a week, and it's really actually is maximizing my schedule. But the great part about entrepreneurship and doing this healing, let me be clear, because I also was an entrepreneur that used to just work all the freaking time and do busy work because I didn't know how to turn it off. Now, it's once I get past the point of doing really plugged in, connected work, I stop. And those, let's call it the 15-hour delta between the 25 hours I work and the extra 15 that would make it 40. It's like during those 15 hours, I actually feel so good about life because I'm usually in mom mode. I go pick up my kids from school every day. Instead of driving through the line so the kids just hop in the car, I park and I walk up. And so then I talk to people that I know. And then we go to activities. And while we're driving, we listen to interesting audiobooks together. Or now we listen to my daughter's favorite Taylor Swift songs. And I'm out living life. And I feel so good. And it feels like a gift that my work supports me in having that time. If I had to spend those 15 hours fake working, doing stupid shit in order to feel busy and look busy and check boxes, I would be a resentful person because then all of a sudden it feels like work is keeping me away from my family and all of these other things that I want to do. So again, from a culture shift perspective, when we value emotional currency, when we value creative currency, it's if your people put in a really solid 25 hours and they are just like in peak performance, peak creativity, peak passion, and you just let them have those 15 hours to do their family, their hobbies, their self-care, they are going to be the happiest freaking people on the planet. And they will probably sing your praises until the end of time and never want to leave your company, which we also know helps the bottom line because employee turnover is expensive.
I love that point. Of you imagine if you were hired for 40 hours a week, but 15 of it was like in support of your mental health? What kind of miracles could happen if that was like, we only expect you to really get 25 hours of solid work here, but we really want to make sure that the things that you're doing support you in every way, shape, and form so you can do your best work. It's like, that is a miracle in itself. I find that one of the things that automatically gets me out of a rut, because I also have it still a little bit greener in the entrepreneurship category than you, Emily, but I still find myself sometimes digging the hole a little bit, like getting myself pigeonholed in the, okay, Kathleen, you should stop, or, oh, I've got writer's block or whatever. And I find that the miracle cure for me is that I go for a walk. If I go outside and go for a walk for 30 minutes, it is like the thing that I was struggling with instantly comes. The thing I didn't know I needed was there. The head is clear. The heart is beating. Like all of a sudden, it's every problem in the world goes away. Connecting with that nature, just being outside, taking the fresh air in. And I have to still sometimes remind myself. I just did it yesterday. I had to be like, Kathleen, you're literally not getting it. I call myself Kathleen when I'm mad, even though I go, I can't.
I know. I was like, this is like your mom voice.
It is. It is. When I know that I need to behave, like Kathleen, Kathleen, you need to get outside right now. Go outside. And sometimes I actually have to force myself because I don't want to. I just want to get the thing done. I just want to go, can I just finish this? Like, why can't? But the reality is, if I step away, take that 30, 35 minutes for myself, walk around, smell the air, look at the beautiful buildings. Like, even if I'm in like a field, it doesn't matter where I am, right? If I can just get outside and connect with nature and to be able to get my mind off of that little screen that I'm just like plugging into, the ideas come, the problems solve themselves. It takes me 6 minutes when I get back to the computer, whenever that is. Maybe it's 35 minutes later, or maybe it's the next morning to go, okay. And then the problem is gone because I don't have the block, the emotional blockage, the energetic blockage, the creative writer's block, like whatever it is, it's just not present when we like work to take ourselves out of that stuckness. The problem when we're inside of a 40-hour work week is that we don't have the opportunity to say, you know what, imagine if you went up to your boss, imagine anybody that goes up to their boss and, you know what, I really need to go for an hour-long walk right now because my head is so fried that like, if I know that if I step out, I can do my best work. Do you know how much courage it takes to say that to a boss who's only focused on the bottom line?
Yeah. Like,
it's not acceptable. It's not something that we've made like appropriate for our culture these days.
Yeah.
And luckily, some places are changing that. Like we're not as bad as we maybe were a few years ago in some of these areas, but imagine how safe you would feel as an employee if you went into that space and you had the courage to ask, hey, I need to go for a walk for 45 minutes. It's really important to me. I know I'll be able to do my best work, that you don't have to beg for it, that your boss would be like, great. I know that's going to help you. I know that you really are going to do your best work. Take the rest of the day off and go for that walk. Do whatever. Imagine what kind of a world we would live in and how much more that would further the bottom line at the end of the day. If that was acceptable, if we didn't have to be afraid to ask our bosses for that time. I remember being so afraid to ask my boss for a half day off. One time in my work, I was very grateful. I asked my boss for 6 weeks off to work on a different project that was outside of my job because they knew I really liked film and I had the opportunity to produce a short film and I really wanted to do it. And I went in there like shaking and I said, I really would like to take 6 weeks off from work so I can create this. And it was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done in my life to these two amazing women bosses that I had that knew that I had this dream. And they were like, okay, take the time off. And they let me take that leave and go. And I got to produce a really amazing project that has since changed the trajectory of how I see my career and where I've gone. And imagine if I didn't have the courage or I didn't feel like the space was there for me to be able to say that. Like, I would still probably be stuck doing something like in a completely different place. Right. And so we never really know what's available to us when we have the courage to ask, but also to find ourselves in an environment where we feel safe to ask is like the call to arms for anybody that's in management, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. I love it so much. And to me, what this is speaking to is leaders change first. Like when we can change ourselves, like don't run this experiment in your office when you don't believe it. Try it yourself first. Mm-hmm. Set the constraint, try a 25-hour week and see how you actually feel and see what your output is. And when you fully believe it, that it's actually so good for work and for personal well-being, then it's effortless to extend it to the rest of your organization. And they will feel safe trying it because they see you modeling it. And so much of workplace culture really comes down to what's being modeled. Because if you say to your team, it's fine, just take a break if you're ever feeling burnt out, go for a walk, and they never see you do it, they will never think it's okay. To anyone listening, try it for yourself, prove it, run a 1-week experiment and see how you feel. From there, it becomes so easy to try and duplicate it and become a model and become like a beacon for change within your organization.
Yeah, I love that call to arms. I think honestly, like there's so much possibility that's available if we take subtle steps like that, just like a 1-week trial. And it does start at the top. Like everybody wants to work for a boss that's just, I trust you, I see you, I want you to do your best work, and I'm willing to set up an environment that allows you to step into your highest version of yourself, because I know that's going to give me the best results on the bottom line at the end of the day. And we're going to live inside a culture where life works and life feels good and our jobs feel good and we want to come to work every day.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest takeaway for anybody that in management, to be like, what would life look like if you stepped into those shoes instead of the shoes that everyone told you to step into, that was like, you have to sacrifice everything, even the word sacrifice. Like
Contraction.
exact instant contraction. You have to sacrifice to make sure that we make the money that we need to make. Imagine if everybody flipped this switch on this culture of work, where we would be. Thinking if we're doing it one step at a time, yes, people need to wake up to it. It takes some time, but conversations like this and being able to show people that it can be another way than the way that it is. Like, I know that I will never, ever again have anyone work for me that doesn't feel like they are safe to come to me about what they need, and then safe to tell me what they want and be able to step into what works best for them. Right now I work for me and I have a couple of helper VA people from time to time come in and writers and things, but I will never not let them do their best work the way they know how to do it, as long as it's in alignment with what I know is best for all of us.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'll never, and I'm sure you can relate. I'm sure you have plenty of support staff that does the same thing.
Yes. And we've found that it's really so helpful. Like at the agency, we have unlimited PTO and we really model it. We model what it looks like to not answer Slack or email when you're on vacation, to come back and post vacation photos in Slack. Like it's just, and our team love it. And then they don't want to leave because then we don't have to worry about them getting headhunted, because there's so much more to working with us than just how much you're getting paid and how much you love it or hate it. So thank you so much for tuning into this series. Kat, thank you so much for co-hosting it. Again, if you haven't tuned into the previous 3, I highly encourage it. And if you resonated with part of this talk and there are others in your organization that you think could benefit, please guide them toward it as well. I really believe that this can help shift and can help change, and that change really does start with each one of us, because as long as we're buying into that old paradigm that I have to be sitting at my desk in order to be productive and I have to put in a hard day's work, and that's where I'm deriving my worth and value and deciding that I'm good enough, it won't change. But there is another way where we feel so lit up and passionate and creative and excited and running a really profitable, growing, healthy business. So thank you so much for tuning in. Kat, any last words?
No, I just thank you for hosting such a beautiful conversation with me as well, and asking to do this series. I think it's been really amazing, and I hope that we can have some new iteration of this in the future. And I'm so lit up by that these conversations can exist, because this is, the more people I give permission to let these conversations like really seep into their bones, the more that we can really change the culture in the world. So I'm really excited that we're having these discussions.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. I hope you learned so much from that. Feel fired up by that conversation. And I wanted to just share what my top takeaways were. Number 1, financial currency is a lag indicator. Number 2, emotional currency is a lead indicator. Number 3, being is good for business. Like we can say that again for the people in the back. Number 4, we have to run the experiment. We've got to believe for ourselves first that we can work less and get more done and feel better about ourselves and our lives before we can try and implement that more broadly across our teams. And number 5, company culture is dictated by what leaders do, not what they say. So if you want to be a leader that's modeling what self-care and well-being and prioritizing emotional currency, you got to do it for yourself first. And as your team sees it modeled for you, they are far more likely to follow suit. So thank you, as always, for tuning into today's show. Listeners like you have made this a top 3% global podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share, and leave a review. I also love hearing listener feedback, so feel free to slide into my DMs on Instagram @mmakesmoney. If you would like to explore hiring me as your money healer and business mentor, hit the link in the show notes or head to explore.emilywilcox.com. Until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes on your joyous path to millions.